Hello and welcome. My name is Ross Morrow, and it's my pleasure to act as host for this week's virtual summit brought to you by NAPW. I'd like to extend a welcome to the many NAPW members joining us today. And for those of you who may not be familiar with us, NAPW is an online and face-to-face community made up of over 850,000 professional women who join together to cultivate valuable business connections, to develop professionally, and to promote themselves and their businesses. If you'd like to learn more about NAPW and the many benefits of membership, please make sure to visit the website at napw.com. This afternoon's webinar, Build Your Brand by Telling Your Story, is part of our 3-day virtual summit for entrepreneurs, where over the course of 12 interactive sessions, we're looking to offer some amazing information and guidance from experts who will provide insights on how to plan, how to launch, how to run, and how to expand your business. Topics covered include how to get started, how to market your business, how to negotiate, how to manage your finances and taxes, and the benefits of using virtual professionals. Before I introduce our guest speaker for this session, a few housekeeping points. You'll be pleased to know that everybody is on mute, so don't worry about coughing or sneezing. We can't hear you. Questions, and I'm sure that there will be lots. Throughout the session today, you'll be able to submit written questions, and we hope there'll be time to answer these at the end of the presentation. Now, depending on the number of questions, we may not get through to all of them, but if that happens, we will do our best to answer them either via blog post or by email, but we'll make sure that we communicate answers to you. And the question that everybody asks, will you be able to see the presentation again if you miss something? Yes, you most certainly will. Recordings of this webinar and all others over the course of the virtual summit this week will be available to view here again on the Bright Talk platform and will be emailed to you as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this session. Debby Stone is a speaker, author, and executive coach. Her book, The Art of Self-Promotion, Tell Your Story, Transform Your Career, has been hailed as immensely practical and the perfect how-to guide for professionals. Debby is the CEO of Novateur Partners, an executive coaching and leadership development consultancy, serving lawyers, entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, and the organizations in which they work. Prior to embarking on her coaching and speaking career, Debby practiced corporate law for over a decade, and she also worked as a management consultant at Bain & Company. During this afternoon's session, Debby is going to teach you how to become a more confident, graceful, and authentic self-promoter, and the benefits that self-promotion will bring to your business or to your career. Debby, thank you so much for joining us today. Let me hand over to you.
Thank you, Russ, and welcome everyone. I want to start out by having you think a little bit about what it is that makes some people more successful in their chosen paths than others. Do you think it's because they are more competent at what they do? I think it is that they're competent at what they do, and there's something else. Competence is certainly important in someone's success, whether that person is an entrepreneur or whether they're in a corporate environment, but it's definitely not the only thing that determines success. We certainly all need to know how to do what we do, and we need to hone our craft, whatever that craft is, and we need to strive to do what we do at the highest level. And I know that each of you who are listening today, you believe that, because that's one of the reasons you're participating in the NAPW Virtual Summit. This is a great opportunity to learn, to grow professionally, and to increase your competence, all of which are important to success. But it is not your level of competence in what you do. That alone will not separate you from the pack. What separates you from other people in your field or your industry is your brand, your story. So I want to start out this afternoon by telling you a story, and it is the story of Rachel. Rachel is the daughter of a friend of mine, and Rachel is a really good tennis player. So when Rachel was in the 9th grade, she was tapped to play on the high school varsity tennis team. And for any of you who are familiar with high school sports, You know that being a freshman in high school and being on the varsity tennis team is a big deal. So she was really excited about this opportunity. And over time, as she was practicing with the other girls prior to matches, she realized that she was every bit as good as any of the other girls on the team, even the seniors. Her level of confidence was very high. But week after week, as the school engaged in matches with other schools, Rachel found herself on the bench. She wasn't getting a chance to play in the matches. So she decided to write a letter to her coaches, her tennis coaches, and tell her story. She pointed out some of her brand attributes. She said that she was hardworking and that she played in tournaments outside of school, that she worked with a private coach, that she was doing a lot of skill drills and practice. She talked to the coaches about her winning mindset, the things that she thought in her head that made her win matches. And she pointed out her mature attitude because she thought that maybe her coaches believed that she was too young to be out on the court as only a freshman. Rachel knew her brand and she told her story. And her coaches, after reading her email, gave her a chance to play in the next match that they had against another school. Well, she won that match, and she got to play every week after that. So the moral of Rachel's story is that competence was important. She had to be and was a really good tennis player. But her competence was not enough to get her out on the court. She had to tell her story. She had to promote herself in order to get the chance to actually play. So you may be asking yourself at this moment, what does a ninth grade tennis player have to do with me? I'm a professional. I have years in my field. But what I want you to take away from this story is that if you want the chance to play, if you want the chance to participate at the highest level in your respective industry, then you need to be able to build your brand by telling your story, just the way Rachel did. Those people who know how to tell their stories, professional women who know how to promote themselves, are the women who are most successful. When we tell our stories, other people are able to connect with us. I was just at a luncheon earlier today with a women's professional group here in Atlanta, which is where I'm located. And multiple times during the course of the table conversation and as the speaker was presenting today, this idea came up, which is that we're out there building relationships, and connecting with people is best done through stories. Because once that connection is forged, once it's there, that's when people really want to work with us. And that's really what self-promotion is all about, where we're going to focus our time. Self-promotion is about confidently, gracefully, and authentically telling your story, the story of who you are and what you contribute in your own unique way. As Russ mentioned, I wrote a book called The Art of Self-Promotion, Tell Your Story, Transform Your Career. And I wrote the book after many years of coaching a variety of people. I have been coaching now for almost 16 years, about 14 when the book came out. And I've coached people ranging in age from those who have just graduated from college all the way to my oldest client who was in his 70s. I have worked with other coaches, with lawyers, with consultants, with entrepreneurs, with corporate leaders up to the C-suite of Fortune 500 companies. And what I know is, after working with hundreds of people over thousands of hours, telling your story is the single thing that every one of my clients has had a struggle with. The vast majority of people, if not all, can't tell their stories as well as they want to. They're not as comfortable telling their stories as they like to be. They hold back from telling their stories. I've heard this over and over and over again. And women, in particular, we struggle even more than our male counterparts. Now, for those men who are listening, I'm not saying that this is an easy fix for you guys, but we as women struggle even more, and some of that can be through our sociology, how we've been raised, that it's not nice to talk about ourselves, but for women, it is that much more challenging. So I'm always excited to talk about this topic, particularly to a group of women. I read an article in Harvard Business Review within the last several weeks about women who have the opportunity to rise to the level of CEO in Fortune 500 companies. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, there are not that many of those women who get to the C-suite, certainly not to the CEO level in Fortune 500 companies. But this Harvard Business Review study was looking at the traits that made those women who did become CEOs successful, and how those traits were similar or different from the traits of their male CEO counterparts. And one of the differences that stood out to those who were in the study was that the women overall were not as comfortable or as adept at self-promotion. What stops us? There is a lot that is challenging about promoting ourselves and telling our stories. But the biggest single reason we don't tell our stories as effectively as we could is inside our own heads. We struggle because we don't hold the right mindset about self-promotion. And a mindset is the assumptions and beliefs that you hold that in turn shape the actions that you see as possible. The assumptions and beliefs that shape the actions that you see as possible. Now, we hold mindsets about many, many things. We hold mindsets about pretty much everything. So if I asked you what you thought of one of your coworkers, whether they were competent or trustworthy, that's something you could answer, and you have a mindset about that. If you think your coworker is trustworthy and competent, then you might want to be on a project team with that person. You might delegate to that person. Flip side, if your mindset is that that person is not competent or not trustworthy, you're likely to keep that work to yourself. You're not going to delegate. You're not going to want to be on a team with that person. So we hold mindsets about many, many things. The kinds of people that go to particular colleges and universities. We hold mindsets about what it's like in different countries, even if we've never been there. And all of those mindsets are conscious. If I asked you about them, you would be able to tell me what your assumptions and beliefs are. The great thing about conscious mindsets, and this is something that we as coaches really tag onto, is that a conscious mindset can be shifted. It can be changed. The mindsets that are the scarier ones are the ones that we hold unconsciously. They are in the background, and they are shaping the actions that we see as possible, even though we don't know they're there. And with those unconscious mindsets, I think of them sort of like spyware on a computer. It's there, and it may be affecting the way your computer operates, but you don't even know it. So it's very much the same with an unconscious mindset. So how we behave relative to whether we promote ourselves or not, and how effectively we do it, is shaped by the mindsets that we hold. Some mindsets that might resonate with you. Some people believe that if they tell their story, they may be seen as arrogant. And the one that many, many people hold, and I do a lot of workshops on this topic, and I hear this from most people, is they feel that self-promotion is uncomfortable. They hold a mindset that it is uncomfortable. So again, many of us have these deeply held negative mindsets about telling our stories. And in my book, I discuss the 7 mindsets of masterful self-promoters. The 7 core mindsets that masterful self-promoters hold. And this afternoon, I'd like to take a few minutes and talk with you about 3 of them, because if you can begin to shift your mindset about telling your story, you will be more effective at actually doing it. So the first mindset shift that I want you to consider is that self-promotion is about sincerely and authentically telling your story. It's about using your own voice, using and leveraging your own sense of humor, your own unique way of being. This is not about having to be someone else. When I first began working to tell a story on myself that's not all that flattering, I was working out in the world, and the people I was working with had very different personalities from mine. I tend to be a little bit louder. I get very animated. I use my hands when I talk. And the folks I was working with were very understated. Their voices were quiet. They didn't use a lot of rising and falling in their voices when they spoke. And so my thought as a young person right out of college was, wow, if I want to be successful, I need to be like them. And I acted like they were. You can imagine how well that served me. Not very well, because I wasn't being authentic and sincere. The best self-promoters are people who are sincere. They're true storytellers. And they tell their stories and engage their audiences by being themselves. Now, one of the things that you may be thinking at this point is, well, gosh, if I'm promoting myself, then people are going to think I'm arrogant or I'm over the top. Well, the nice thing about that is if you're thinking about it, then you are automatically okay. Humility, our baked-in sense of humility, is the balance that keeps our self-promotion from going over the top. We all know the over-the-top, obnoxious over-promoter. That person who comes into the room and literally sucks all of the air out of it because of the way they talk about themselves. We don't want to be near that person, and we definitely don't want to be that person. If you are consciously aware of wanting to avoid arrogance, then your baked-in sense of humility will keep your self-promotion from going over the top. Remember to be authentic and sincere as you tell your stories, and then your humility will allow you to stay at just the right level. The second mindset that I want to share with you this afternoon is to shift from the idea of storytelling to storytelling, which is a word I made up, to storytelling. This is about telling your story. So this session, for example, was called Build Your Brand by Telling Your Story. It wasn't called Build Your Brand by Selling Yourself. And for many of us, we equate self-promotion and brand building with selling ourselves. And that can be, for many people, a real turnoff. For most of us, we think about selling and we think of a push, a hard kind of energy, making people want to do something. And what I want you to do is to really begin to understand that this is about sharing information in an engaging way so that people know about you, who you are, what you do, how you do it. And then they can make an informed decision about whether they want to work with you or hire you or be your client. So, as I've mentioned, self-promotion is definitely an art, not a science. And one of the things that I've learned from being an entrepreneur for many years, and I have been an entrepreneur for many, many years, first with my own law practice and now running Novateur Partners. And the thing I've learned is that to be effective, you have, as a self-promoter, you have to think like an entrepreneur, whether you are one yet or not. Your product is you. You may have a specific product that you also sell. But for each and every one of us, if you're interested in building your brand, your product is you. So let's think about this as if our product was a car. If you wanted to sell a car, you would want to know its features. You want to know about it, right? And you would absolutely want to know about it in a full color, expressive kind of way. So if you look at this picture, you look at the car, you think to yourself, wow, that car's kind of sexy. You know, it looks like it goes fast. It looks like you can feel the rush of air while you're driving. Maybe you think, gosh, it looks like it might be energy efficient because all those wind turbines in the background make you think that it might be. It's interesting. It catches your attention. Whereas if I wanted to learn about the car another way, maybe I would look at this specification sheet for the car. Not very sexy, pardon me. We just got 2 slides ahead. It's moving a little slowly here. There we go. The specification sheet for the car, not very sexy. It's a boring set of statistics. You may need to know this information to buy the car, but it's not what's going to catch your attention. I think of the standard features of a car kind of like our resumes. Important information, but not what you share when you're trying to create a relationship with someone. When you want to create a relationship with someone, you need to be the best full color, succinct, easy to watch, well thought out commercial for yourself that you can possibly be. And we need to each and every one of us do that for ourselves. So it is about telling your story in a full color way, not selling yourself. The third place I want us to look in terms of mindset is that preparation is absolutely critical here. This is not a show up and wing it kind of thing. Essentially, the crux of your career, as we said at the beginning, is not only how competent you are at what you do, but it's how well you tell your story. And you'll spend countless hours honing your craft, whatever you do, learning how to do it better, refining how you do it. You have to spend time also in creating the foundation of your self-promotion story. You have to have a foundation of preparation so that when you do tell your story, it's comfortable, it's interesting, it's authentic, and it's not over the top. The reason that you want to be prepared is that there are opportunities to tell your story. There are opportunities to self-promote that show up anytime and all the time. I'm going to tell you a couple of quick stories as examples. The first is I take bar classes, and many of you may be familiar with bar. It's yoga, Pilates, and the ballet bar in exercise class version. And as we're standing at the bar waiting for class to start, I'm often surrounded by others that I don't know. And sometimes I'll end up striking up a conversation with another woman as we're waiting for class to start. We may chat for a few minutes, and they may ask me, hey, when you're not in bar class, what do you do? And I need to be prepared in that moment to succinctly and very accurately talk about what I do. The second example I'm going to give you of an anytime and all the time is in the corporate environment. I have a friend, and he was the boss of a young woman. The young woman is, we'll call her Suzanne. And so my friend goes into Suzanne's office one day and says, hey, Suzanne, the senior vice president is coming into town, and I'm going to take senior vice president to lunch, and then we're going to come by your office afterwards and say hello. And Suzanne says, okay, great. So after lunch, my friend and the senior vice president come into Suzanne's office, and the senior vice president says, Suzanne, it's so nice to meet you. What's happening? What's going on? And Suzanne says, not much, just working. Wow, what a self-promotion opportunity missed. She had a heads up, which we don't always have, but it was a great opportunity for her to take the time to prepare, to talk about something interesting that she was engaged in before the senior vice president came to her office, and she didn't take that opportunity. Did it hurt her career? Maybe not. But it definitely didn't help her career either, and it was a missed opportunity. So we need to be prepared to tell our stories anytime and all the time in a variety of contexts and to a variety of different audiences. But as I talk about in my book, there are also some times that I call sanctioned self-promotion opportunities where we know in advance that we are going to have the chance to tell our stories, and it is both accepted and expected that we would do so in these contexts. And there are 4 of them, and I'm going to run through them with you, and I want you to be thinking about which ones apply to you in your world right now. So the first one is job interviews. If you have ever been or ever plan to go on a job interview, this is what I call a sanctioned self-promotion opportunity. You must be ready to tell your story. And you must be ready to tell your story in an easily digestible way. If you're not, I promise you, the person who comes in after you is the one who's going to get the job. Job interviews are certainly about competence. Can you do the job? But as much as they're about competence, they are also about, are you the person that this company wants to have do the job? So when you confidently and authentically tell your story, they can evaluate that. One of the things that most people get asked in a job interview is, tell me about yourself. And that is the prototypical example of something you must be prepared for. How do you tell your story succinctly and quickly in connection with that question? I've seen people really mess it up by literally regurgitating their entire resume. That's not what someone wants in those moments. They want the meat, the juice, the interesting stuff. A young person that I have the privilege of knowing graduated from college not long ago and was interviewing for a Wall Street job. And on this young woman's resume was the fact that she had done some studying with a couple of celebrity chefs, and it named the celebrity chefs. She loved to cook. And as she went through the interview process, she got to the final round, and the most senior person she was interviewing with, turns out, was a chef himself and loved celebrity chefs and cooking. He struck up a conversation about that based on her resume, and even though there were lots of other competent people who were interviewing for that job, she got the job because she had that interesting piece of information on her resume and was able to tell her story, to talk about it. So job interviews are the first of the contexts where it's both accepted and expected that you'll tell your story. The second is performance reviews. If you're working in a corporate environment, you are going to have, hopefully, performance reviews. And during this time, it's a chance for you to talk about where you've been, how you've succeeded, and to point toward where you want to go. Many times I've had clients who are being considered for the next level role in their organization, and they are being considered, but whoever their next level boss is will say to me as their coach, hey, you know, I'd love to consider so-and-so for this role, but I'm not sure they're really interested. We have to tell our stories of our successes, and we need to point toward where we want to go. So performance reviews are another one of the opportunities that we have to tell our stories. The third of these sanctioned opportunities is networking and client development. Absolutely critical if you are or plan to be an entrepreneur. Again, as I mentioned to you, I was at a women's networking event earlier today, and we sat at a round table. There were about 8 people at each table, and before the speaker began, we each had the chance to go around the table and tell a little bit about ourselves, to share what we do. And those are great brand building opportunities. Tell your story in those moments and be prepared to do it so that it comes across the way you want it to. And finally, the fourth of the sanctioned opportunities is what I call internal brand building. When you are working in an organization, you have the chance to let people know on a regular basis what you and your team are doing and how you're doing it. And this is very important because everyone that we work with is busy. They are focused on their own careers, their own projects, their own work, and they are not paying attention to what you're doing. Many of us like to think that our work is going to speak for itself, and I wish that were the case. but it's not. We have to be building our brand all the time by telling our stories. So we want to take into account the context and the audience. Who am I talking to and where am I? Am I at work? Am I at a networking event? Am I at a neighborhood barbecue? Who's my audience? How much time do they have? And you may even want to script some of these stories and practice. One note of caution here, though. If you're like me, the way you write and the way you talk are not the same. So I could write something that sounds really eloquent, and I think, wow, that's it. I got it, all the right words. But then if I try to say that exact same thing out loud, it comes across like I memorized it, and it's all stilted and uncomfortable, and I lose the authenticity. It's not graceful. I can't be confident saying it. So make sure that you practice saying your stories out loud. So the other reason to prepare and to practice is because we live in the Twitter sphere. We live in the world of sound bites, and we have to capture someone's attention really, really quickly when we're telling our stories. When we're telling our stories, we have about 20 seconds to capture someone's attention and to really engage them. We have about 20 seconds, and my timer stopped, but we have, there we go, about 20 seconds before, even if they're physically present, they are mentally gone. They may still be staring at you, but their brain is somewhere else. And 20 seconds is not very long. That's about how long we have initially to capture someone. So what do we need to do in those 20 seconds? The first thing we need to do in those 20 seconds is we need to establish or reinforce our credibility. This is where that competence piece comes back into play. What makes you credible at what you do? For me, I might tell someone that I've been coaching for almost 16 years, or that I am a former practicing lawyer, or that I wrote a book about self-promotion. But you want to think about what makes you competent, what makes you credible, and share that in those first 20 seconds. The second thing, which is the part that for most of us is less intuitive and we're not as good at, is that we want to create curiosity. We want to create curiosity so that the other person wants to be in conversation with us, so that they ask a question. So this is really important because conversations lead to relationships, and success is based on relationships. People hire, promote, and do business with others that they know, that they like, that they trust. And if, when we talk about ourselves, if in those first 20 seconds we use jargon, or we say something that maybe describes what we do but doesn't give any interest to the other person, then the party's over. They are going to be finished talking. The perfect example would be someone who is a lawyer and gets introduced, and they say, "Hi, I'm Susie Smith. I'm a securities litigator." Wow. Great. Nice to meet you, Susie. Conversation over. No curiosity was created there. What if instead Susie said something like, "Hi, I'm Susie Smith. I'm a lawyer with XYZ Law Firm, and I help companies maximize their value for shareholders." How do you do that, Susie? That creates some curiosity. I know that I've hit the curiosity button when somebody asks me how or why I made the transition from practicing law to being an executive coach and a speaker. That tells me that they are interested enough to want to continue a conversation and that we are heading toward building a relationship. Question becomes, how do I establish my credibility and create curiosity in those 20 seconds? There are a lot of different ways to do it, and sometimes that in and of itself feels really overwhelming. In my book, I take the readers through several different areas of self-reflection so that you can begin to put the components of your self-promotion story together. The first of these areas is to start to get to know your strengths. Everyone has strengths, but most of us don't really own our strengths. We may acknowledge them, but we don't own them. When I say own them, what I really mean is, do you really believe that it's a strength of yours? Are you confident when you talk about that strength? One of the ways that you can build your muscle around self-promotion is to really get comfortable with your strengths. And to go deeper, a way to do that is to hone your ability to accept a compliment. When we get a compliment, most of us, women in particular, when we get a compliment, many of us will not only say thank you, but we will also do one of two things. Either we will give a compliment right back to the other person. Hey, Debbie, I like your dress. Oh, gosh, yeah, I know, thank you, and I love your necklace. That way we've evened the score, because none of us likes to be indebted to somebody else. It doesn't feel right. Well, she gave me a compliment. I should give her one back. The second thing that we often do is we say thank you, and then we downplay what they have complimented us for. So, hey, Debbie, good job putting together that event. Oh, thanks. It really was not that big of a deal. I was just part of a team. It was really nothing. So we essentially return the compliment to the giver. And I know, even though I don't know all of you personally, I know that this resonates for most of you. We are not good at accepting compliments. So I want to challenge all of you to begin to accept compliments by simply saying thank you and then stopping. Zip it. Don't say anything else. If you can learn to accept a compliment by simply saying thank you, you will build your self-promotion muscle, and believe it or not, you'll actually start to hear what people are complimenting you for, and you'll begin to own the strengths that you possess, your unique strengths, because you'll actually take in what people are saying about you. So the first piece of self-reflection that you need to do is to understand your strengths, because those are going to be critical components of your self-promotion stories. The second of the self-reflection pieces is accomplishments. Every single one of you has many, many, many accomplishments. Most of us, however, don't acknowledge our accomplishments unless they're the big ones. We're happy to acknowledge when we graduate from a school, or when we land the perfect client, or we start our companies. But for most of us, it's all the little accomplishments that we make every day, all the time, that go unnoticed. We're really, really good at looking up the mountain and seeing how much farther we need to climb. And we're not really good at stopping for a moment, looking from where we are and saying, wow, I've really come a long way. So I would encourage each and every one of you to start to keep an accomplishment log. If you do not know what you are accomplishing, you can be assured that no one else does either. This is critical. If somebody says to you, what have you been doing this year? What are you most proud of this year? You need to be able to answer. So start to keep track of your accomplishments. Not only will it give you information that you can use as you build your brand by telling your story, but it will also act like rocket fuel for you. The more we acknowledge our accomplishments, the more we want to accomplish. It just feels good. We love hearing about other people's accomplishments. That's why we pay so much money for motivational speakers and inspirational books. There's a lot of power in accomplishment. The third piece of self-reflection that I want to encourage you to do is to know your passion. What do you love about what you do? What juices you up? Why do you get out of bed in the morning to go and do the work that you do? Every single one of us is attracted to working with people that are passionate about what they do. It's a real engaging quality. So you want to tap into that passion and know what it is and use it as you tell your stories. A quick note about passion for those of you who are thinking about how you might share your passion for something. For many of us, passion is animated and loud and full of big gestures. That would be me. That's not everyone. Sometimes passion is really quiet. It can be seen in someone's depth of knowledge, for example. They may know a lot about their subject matter. So know that you can share your passion, show your passion in lots of different ways. Remember, authenticity matters. So show your passion in a way that's true to you. The fourth piece of self-reflection that I talk about in my book is looking at your unique experiences to date. Every single one of us has a story. We have a past, things that have happened to us that have had an impact on who we are and where we are in our lives and our careers. How did you choose to do what you do? Often what we do is a byproduct of what we did before, or an experience that we've had, or something that has happened in the course of our lives. Think about those experiences. Also think about just plain unique experiences that you've had. Maybe you've cooked with celebrity chefs, for example. Maybe you're like one of the students who attended a graduate school workshop that I did in October who said that his most unique experience was that he was kicked by a donkey once. I'm not sure how that affected his path as an engineer, but maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But it sure got a laugh out of the people in the room, and they felt more connected to him. So we have lots of unique experiences. And if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know, my life hasn't been that interesting, trust me, it is. Other people connect with you because of the experiences that you've had. The final piece of self-reflection that I talk about in the book and want to talk a little bit about this afternoon is your brand. Now, there are books and books and books written about brand. We could have spent this entire afternoon talking only about brand as a component of your story, but I do want to spend at least a few minutes talking about it. A brand, as we're thinking about it, is signified by what people think of when they hear your name. The best definition of brand that I ever heard was when I was on a panel a number of years ago, and a branding expert was also on the panel. And he said that a brand is the promise that we make and how we deliver on that promise. So a great example of that is, let's say, toothpaste. Let's say my product is toothpaste. And if I say that the brand for my toothpaste is that it will deliver whiter teeth in 10 days, great. Then that's the promise that I've made. Now, if you go out and you use my toothpaste for 10 days and your teeth are exactly the same, or maybe they're worse, they're more yellow, not white, then even though I've said whiter teeth in 10 days is the brand of my toothpaste, it's not going to be the brand that sticks because I haven't fulfilled that promise. So for each of us, we have to think about what is the promise of our brand, what's our brand promise, and can we deliver on it? Now, I want you, each and every one of you, to know that you have a brand right now. You have a brand, whether you have created it by design or whether you have created it by default. If I went around and I talked to the people that you work with, your clients, the people who know you, every single one of you, they would be able to tell me, well, I think Jennifer's brand is X, or I think Brittany's brand is Y. The key here is to design your brand, not let it happen by default. What do you want people to think of when they hear your name? What is that promise that you want to make and you can deliver on? So in our few remaining minutes, I want to get really specific about how building your brand by telling your story can help you. I want you to think for a moment about your professional goals for the next 12 months. If you already have a business, how do you want to grow that business? If you haven't yet stepped out as an entrepreneur, is this the year that you're going to do it? What goals do you hold for yourself, for business growth, for your professional development? Think a moment about those. Now, with those goals in mind, I want you also to begin to think about the people who need to know your story so that you can achieve those goals that you have for yourself. None of us can achieve our goals without other people. So there are people who have to know who you are, what you do, and how you do it if you are going to achieve the goals that you have. You may not know those people yet by name. You may not have met them. But even if you don't know them specifically, you know them generally. Well, the senior vice president of HR needs to know my story. Or 10 people engaged in this particular industry who would be my clients need to know my story. Or I need to meet 4 financial planners who can send clients my way. Those are the people who need to hear your story so you can achieve your goals. It is not enough for you to know what your goals are and to know who needs to hear your story. You actually have to get out there and take action. You have to tell your story. You have to move forward in order to achieve these goals. Some things you might do, actions you might take. Maybe you need to shift your mindset about telling your story, about promoting yourself so that you can tell your story effectively, confidently, gracefully, and authentically. Maybe you need to do some of the self-reflection to figure out what can I share with people about who I am and what I do. You might need to practice telling your stories before you have the chance to do it in real life so you're comfortable, so you're confident. You might need to read my book or hire a coach for yourself so that you have people in your world who are giving you feedback in real time about your self-promotion efforts. So as we wrap up this afternoon, I want to hone in on 3 things that I'd really like you to take away. The first is, and these are the 3 keys to success as someone who is building their brand by telling their story. The very first is be prepared. Take the time to think and reflect and get to know yourself. Think and reflect on the opportunities that you have to tell your story, the people that you need to reach with your story, and take this every bit as seriously as you would learning an aspect of what you do. Competence is important. How you tell your story is equally important. So take the time and be prepared. The second key to success is to be yourself. Be the best professional version of you can be. Be authentic. Be you. Use your sense of humor, your personality. People cannot connect if you are not actually there. And people will connect with you as a person. And those connections are what will ripen into business relationships. The third key is something that after many years as an executive coach, I know to be critically important. And that is to be accountable. You must be accountable for taking action on this. I know how easy it is to listen to a webinar and say, wow, that was interesting, and then go back to everything as it was. What I want for you is more than that. I want you to take action. And the best way that I know for you to take action is for you to have an accountability partner. Someone who can help you hone your self-promotion stories, someone who can help you identify your strengths and remember your accomplishments, someone who can let you know whether you are becoming over the top in your self-promotion efforts or whether you can be more self-promoting. So find a buddy, a mentor, a coach, someone who can hold you accountable for taking action on what we've talked about today. And I'd love to challenge you to take some action in the first 48 hours after you listen to this webinar, because those first 48 hours are key. If you take an action in the first 48 hours, it is far more likely that you will achieve your goals. So as we wrap up, and I'm going to certainly answer questions, but I know I won't have a chance to answer all of your questions. On the screen is my contact information. I'd be delighted to answer questions that you have in the future and to hear some of your self-promotion stories and how that's going for you. You can also find more information on my website or through purchasing the book, which is available on Amazon. But bottom line is, if you have questions, I definitely want to be available to answer them. And I'd love to spend the next few minutes answering as many of the questions that you all have submitted as I can. Russ, I'm going to ask you if any of the questions that have been submitted are jumping out at you for a starting point.
Debbie, there are some fantastic questions that have come through from the audience. And firstly, a big thank you to you. You've given us all some amazing takeaways and tips about how to build your brand. And I'm certainly going to be investing some time on some self-reflection and practicing telling my story. So very much appreciated. A couple of things there that stand out. First of all, and once again, I apologize, we're not going to get through all of these. Could you, we've been asked by one of the audience, could you give that definition of what a brand is again, please?
Absolutely. So, as I said, this is one of many definitions of brand, but it's the one I like the best. And the definition of brand is the promise that you make and then how you deliver on that promise. The promise you make and then how you deliver on that promise.
Thank you. Now, here's another one as well that I think you touched on, but one of the audience has mentioned, can you use humor and still seem sincere and authentic? Is there a place for humor?
Absolutely. In fact, in my world, if you have a sense of humor and you're not using it, you are wasting a critical asset. One of the things that I often say when I'm talking with prospective coaching clients is that if we haven't shared a laugh in the course of our conversation, that's probably not the right client for me, because humor is so important to me. It's a part of who I am as a person. And so if humor is a value of yours, if it's something that you hold dear and feel is a part of your authentic personality, definitely use it. The yellow caution flag that I want to throw up about humor is that not everyone has the same sense of humor. I have a colleague who has a very, very dry sense of humor. I think he's hilarious, but not everybody gets his humor. So sometimes it will go right past someone. So you've got to pay attention and really, really notice when I'm using humor with this person or this audience, is it landing with them? Or is it falling flat? So absolutely try it, use it as long as it's a part of who you are, and again, adjust it as necessary to the context and the audience. Just like everything with self-promotion, we have to be really aware of our context and our audience at all times.
Great advice. I think that's brilliant about being aware of the context and the audience. So thank you. This is a great question as well. From one of the audience, what is the best way or the best ways to know that your audience sees you as a thought leader rather than being an arrogant self-promoter? Are there ways that you can tell?
I think, first of all, again, if you are aware of avoiding being arrogant, your likelihood that you're coming across as arrogant is low. The people who tend to come across as arrogant are the ones who are not even aware that this is a possible concern. So, and you can probably hear the slight hint of humor in my voice there, but it is actually true that if you are consciously aware, you are likely falling on the side of thought leader and not arrogant self-promoter, over-the-top self-promoter. However, if it is something that concerns you, my suggestion would be to try out what you're saying on this self-promotion buddy that I recommended that you get. Most of us, if self-promotion is a scale of 0 to 10, most of us fall somewhere between a 4 and a 7 in terms of maximizing our self-promotion. We keep ourselves at a lower level because we're afraid of going over the top and being seen as arrogant. But we have room to do what I call turn up the volume. We just don't know it. The first time I tried out one of my self-promotion stories on someone, I thought, oh my goodness, I think I'm really getting close to being over the top. And my colleague listened, and his response was, you know, you've really got room. You could be more self-promoting and not at all be arrogant or over the top. So for most of us, we don't know where the line is, so I absolutely suggest trying it out on people that you know and you trust.
Thanks, Debbie. And there's a few
Sure.
questions here that have come in along the same sort of line, and it's really about time. So somebody's asked, how much time should it take to tell my story? Is there an absolute maximum amount of time? And somebody else has asked, great question, any tips on balancing the time spent on telling your story versus actively listening to another person's story?
So I'll take sort of both of them at the same time and yet separately. So the first thing to know, remember when I said that you have about 20 seconds to capture someone's attention. When you are telling your story, those first 20 seconds are absolutely critical. That doesn't mean that every single time you're in a conversation and the volley comes to you that you only have 20 seconds, but you're going to want to keep things really succinct. If you have a story to tell, practice telling it so that you can tell it in 20 to 45 seconds rather than 3 minutes. Really keep things shorter. People can always ask you a follow-up question, but you can never get their attention back once it has wandered because you've gone too long. So better to err on the side of short and sweet, and let them ask you the follow-up. Similarly, as this question about time telling your story versus actively listening, the way I've heard it said is that the perfect conversation is essentially like a tennis match where things are being volleyed back and forth. If you perceive that you are talking more than listening, you're erring on the wrong side of that tennis volley. You want it to be even, or perhaps you listening more. When we listen, first of all, it makes the other person feel valued, and so they're going to come away and think, wow, that was a great conversation. The second thing that's important about listening is that we learn about what our audience wants to hear more of. We can hone our self-promotion stories in the moment because we're learning about what they care about. So if I had to choose, I would always err on the side of listening more and talking less.
Fantastic. Thanks, Debbie. Now, we are getting very close to the end, so there are quite a few questions that have come in along a similar theme, and that's about rebranding. I think you'd mentioned about a colleague and the conversation with the VP, and somebody else has said, is it possible to rebrand yourself? So if you have perhaps missed an opportunity, how easy? Any tips on how to try and rebrand?
So rebranding is a big subject, and in many ways, rebranding is like turning the Titanic. It takes time. So I'll talk about the big rebrand quickly first, and then talk about that particular situation for just a moment. The big rebrand is, first of all, about getting clear what is the brand I want to have, and then making sure that the actions that you take and the things that you say align with that brand. Rebranding is about consistency in action and words over time. It takes a while to shift people's perceptions. So that's what I'll say about rebranding in the big picture. In the short term, if you miss an opportunity, like the one that we talked about where the senior VP came into the office and the young woman didn't give much of an answer, there's always a second chance, meaning be prepared. If the next time the senior VP comes in, make sure that you're ready and you have something really good to share. You may also say to yourself, you know what, that was a missed opportunity. Ask your boss, would it be appropriate for me to send a follow-up email and say, hey, it was great to meet you, Senior VP. Just wanted to let you know that among the things I'm working on, XYZ is one of them, and here's why that's important to the organization. So there may be opportunities in the next little while to actually rebrand in a situation like that.
Excellent, Debbie. I'm afraid that we have reached the end of the allotted time. The questions are still coming in, and I know we could go on for a long time. There's been a huge amount of great response to this session. Thank you so much for sharing these amazing takeaways and tips. Recordings, I know we've got people asking about whether they can see the recording again. So to confirm, recordings of this session and all the others over the course of the virtual summit this week will be made available to view again here on the BrightTalk platform, as well as being emailed to you. If you haven't already done so, please make sure that you register for and attend the other sessions taking place today and tomorrow. We've got an excellent session in about an hour's time on creating the win-win scenario through negotiating. And we kick off tomorrow with a webinar on legal tips for entrepreneurs. Please also remember to visit napw.com for details of the many benefits that membership brings. To close this amazing session, just brings it to me to say a huge thank you to Debbie for sharing, and for everybody for joining us this afternoon. I look forward to welcoming you to the other virtual seminar sessions over the next 2 days. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.